Yo, what is going on, guys? My name is Tyler. I'm one of the FF mediators here on the Face Off Sports Network. We're back with my Week 5 tight end rankings video. Obviously, since we're going into Week 5, we've completed 4 weeks of the NFL regular season. That also marks about a 25% mark of completed games in our fantasy football season. So, what does that do for us, right? So, we're able to look at some tight end usage trends in terms of their respective offenses. Not only that, but we're also able to look at some defenses that we should be targeting, especially at the tight end position, and just overall, as we've got 4 weeks of data now, and we kind of see how these defenses stack up against the rest of the competition. So, without further ado, let's jump right into my tier one here. You'll see obviously very similar names. Now you'll notice Tucker Craft is not on this name. And for a long time, when I was doing my rankings, I was like, where is Tucker Craft? Where is Tucker Craft? His bye week. That's what happened. We are in our first round of buys this week. You've got some notable names like Tucker Craft, as well as Kyle Pitts and some others that are going to be missing. So if you start looking through these names and you're like, where are all these guys at? Chances are they're probably on bye. Back to our tier one here. I've got Trey McBride at 1, Brock Bowers at 2, Tyler Warren at 3, and Jake Ferguson actually at 4. So, yes, Jake Ferguson is a newcomer here in the tier 1. But let's get back up and we'll go down the list here in order. So, Trey McBride last week, 7 catches, 11 targets, and 52 yards. That's great at the tight end position, guys. I know he may not have produced, he may not have scored a touchdown, and your top touchdown scorers on the week were both Dallas Goedert and Darren Waller, and they finished 1 and 2 respectively, right? But these guys are being used in their offenses at a very high rate. And so for me, Trey McBride still stays at 1. They do play Tennessee this week, which according to PFF, they are the 15th ranked defense out of 32 so far. Trey McBride is first in routes run, second in receptions, targets, and yards at the position. So to me, he's an easy number 1 pick here. And I look forward to seeing him continue and see if this offense can continue the steam it had with Marvin Harrison last week and see if they can get Trey McBride back involved. Now, number 2, we have Brock Bowers. Obviously, he has not looked the best this year, but I do believe that's due to the knee injury and also just Geno being the quarterback in general. I think overall, I truly think that, Geno's not played his best, obviously, but I think that's probably hampering him. They've also got Ashton Genty, who just scored like 33 points last week. He had 3 touchdowns. So you're starting to see this kind of shift in Vegas. Will they continue to throw the ball like they were last year? The good part is they're playing Indianapolis this week. They are the 30th out of 32 defenses. He's still currently 5th in targets and receptions and yards after the catch per reception. So he's still high up there in terms of those metrics. He's also 3rd in yards, just overall. So even though last week he only had 5 catches on 6 targets for 46 yards, he didn't score, which obviously puts a damper on things at the tight end position. But these two guys are still elite level usage in their respective offenses. So you just keep them out on the field. And then we get to the man on the screen. And as you know, I am a Colts fan. So I love talking about some Tyler Warren. I've got my notes here. So far this year, he is 1st in yards, 4th in targets, 5th in catches. That all sounds great. And you're like, well, those kind of line up with, McBride and Bowers in terms of they're comparable, right? However, the one thing that Tyler Warren has that those guys don't is he's used on the goal line and as a wildcat back. So this past week, Tyler Warren had 2 carries out of the backfield. One, he lined up as a fullback, which he actually scored on. The second one was a wildcat play where he was the quarterback. And no, he didn't get in that time, but that goes to show you that the Colts view him as not just a receiving threat. They view him as a rushing threat and a superior athlete that they want to get the ball to in any way they can. And so for me, obviously, Tyler Warren, he will be on the thumb, as you've already seen. He's my guy here on my tier 1 graphic. And yes, he's ranked at 3, but I truly think he's right up here with McBride and Bowers in terms of usage and importance to his overall offense. And so for me, that's why he still stays in tier 1. Pop my graphic back up here. You've got Jake Ferguson, right? The Dallas Cowboys. With CD going down, we were curious how it was going to look last week. I had a little bit of hesitancy. I just wanted to see, okay, if there's no CD on the field, can Pickens step up? Who else gets involved? Is it just Jake Ferguson and Pickens? Do they run the ball more? What do they decide to do? And so for me, I had a little bit of a cool approach last week on Jake Ferguson, but last week he had 7 catches on 7 targets for 40 yards and a touchdown. He's still used the exact same he has been all year, guys. And so currently he is the first in targets and catches and 6th in route runs overall at the position. So they take on the Jets this week. They are the 12th best defense out of 32. But really and truthfully, I'm not worried about it. You just watched Dallas put up 40 points on the Green Bay Packers, who we all would have imagined and said that they were a top tier defense going into last week, and they got embarrassed. Frankly, it was a boat race. Even went into overtime and ended in a tie. And Jake Ferguson was heavily involved in that. So for me, I'm taking Jake Ferguson there, and that's my first tier one. Those 4 guys are just heavily used in their offenses. I think they've got good matchups this week, and they have the metrics to back it up. Thanks PFF for doing all of that hard work for me so that I can actually get it to you guys. Now, moving down to tier 2, these guys are going to be guys that I'm still high on. Maybe they had some bad performances last week, but there are little nuances as to why I still have them so high on my list. So the next 4 guys that I have popped up here, you're going to see Juwan Johnson, Sam Laporta, Hunter Henry, and Dalton Kincaid. So let's address the elephant in the room. Juwan Johnson had a stinker last week. 3 catches, 3 targets, 28 yards. Didn't look great. Okay. Neither did the Saints offense, really. But they kept that game a whole lot closer than people expected. And it was not with Juwan Johnson at the helm. The score showed at the end that the Bills, kind of came out and dominated. That wasn't the tail of the game throughout the whole afternoon. So the score doesn't really indicate how close the game was, but yet Juwan Johnson not being involved obviously hurt a little bit. They do go up against the Giants this week, supposedly the 5th ranked team according to PFF. However, Juwan Johnson is still 2nd in routes run, 3rd in targets and receptions at the position. Now, obviously we've talked about last week and how that didn't look the best. The one thing that I do want to caution you on with him here, and I don't think it's too much to be concerned about, but I think it's interesting, is Taysom Hill is actually coming back to practice. I believe he started the year on either IR or the physically unable to perform list, the PUP. And he's coming back to practice or been cleared to start practicing again. Now, the reason I say that is I don't think it really impacts Juwan Johnson this week, right? And I truly think that Juwan Johnson has earned his role in this offense. And so I don't know that how much it's going to affect him going forward. However, it is something to monitor because when Taysom Hill has been on the field, he is used very heavily. He's in there as a quarterback. He's in there as a running back. He's in there as a tight end. They try to run the offense through him as much as they can, kind of similar to how we see Tyler Warren being used right now. We just haven't seen the quarterback part, right? So for me, I think it's something to monitor. I don't think it's anything, that's going to hurt him, like I said, immediately. But I think it's something we should keep an eye on going forward. Let me pop my graphic back up here. And we've got Sam Laporta, right? Now, 3 catches, 4 targets, 39 yards. Not great metrics overall on the back end in terms of, routes run, receptions, targets, all that. He's not really profiling as a top 10 guy right now. However, they play the Cincinnati Bengals, which we all know are a dumpster fire currently. So for me, I'm still willing to have Sam Laporta up here. Really and truthfully, Detroit is all about who scores the touchdowns that week. They're still scoring a ton of points without Ben Johnson. You've had, multiple weeks now where you've had both Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery either score 1 or multiple touchdowns. Amon-Ra is still obviously the one there. So it's all about whether or not he gets in the end zone. He's still being targeted in the red zone. He just has to fall in to the painted area for us to be truly happy with where he's at, right? So I think you still play him this week since he's the 26th best defense, or worst, I guess I should say. So they're a defense that we should definitely be targeting as long as the trends continue to hold, which I don't see any reason why they would. Um, at 7, we have Hunter Henry here. They're facing Buffalo this week, but last week they faced the Panthers, and I cautioned you again last week. I said Hunter Henry is always a threat to have a touchdown. He's always a threat to have a touchdown. However, his involvement is not always the best, right? So he's a veteran that they trust. If they need him in the red zone, they'll throw it to him. And that was kind of evidenced last week. He had 2 catches on 2 targets for 39 yards and a touchdown. He was wide open against the Panthers defense, and he scored pretty easily, right? Now, that touchdown kept him in the relevance of as far as tight end production went last week. And so far, right now, he actually leads the league in touchdowns with 3. He's actually tied with our next guy in Dalton Kincaid. They both have 3 touchdowns right now at the tight end position. So that's the number one there. What we're looking at, though, is how does Henry continue to stay involved? He's ranked second in average depth of target, or ADOT. So he's being targeted further down the field. He's still being a red zone threat. And that's the issue here. The only thing is I think with Buffalo, they're going to have to score points. And I'm not super enthused about the other receiving options there, right? No, it's not the best matchup, but I think he has a chance, right, to get in the end zone. He's been doing it well. Him and Drake May obviously have some rapport that they've been working on in both the offseason as well as developing it throughout the first 4 games this year. So for me, I'm willing to keep him here. If he has another, game where it's just a few targets, but a touchdown and let's say 25 yards or something like that, I'll probably move him down next week. But as of right now, we're just riding the high and hoping that he gets back into the end zone. I mentioned him before, and I'll pop up our graphic here just to show you. Dalton Kincaid is my number 8 tight end this week. Um, they're on the opposite sides of the ball, obviously. If the Patriots are playing Buffalo, that means Buffalo is playing the Patriots. So the Patriots defense is 10th overall. Here's the issue. Similar to Hunter Henry, Kincaid did not have a great week last week. He caught 1 ball for 28 yards and a touchdown. Like I said, he's tied with Hunter Henry in terms of touchdowns overall in the season. He's 4th in ADOT, so just a little few spots behind Hunter Henry there. The issue in Buffalo is different from the issue in New England for me, though. So in New England, we don't really know what the receiving options are. We think Hunter Henry might be the lead there, but then you get these games from Stephon Diggs and Keishon Butte and all these other guys, and they kind of stand out, right? In Buffalo, though, Josh Allen just has always spread the ball around, and there's really no one there. The only consistency so far has been Kincaid, and that's been evidenced by his 3 touchdowns. So, yes, they get Shakir involved. Yes, they're hoping for a Keon Coleman outbreak that doesn't look like it's going to happen right now. And James Cook is still heavily involved in the run game. And obviously, Josh Allen as well as a threat with his legs. So, for me, the receiving game is all about who's going to get the touchdowns. Right now, it's obvious that Dalton Kincaid is kind of Josh Allen's go-to for that. And playing the Patriots defense, I think they can get back in the end zone this week. And we'll just have to see who scores better out of the two. And like I said, those 2 guys are kind of flip-flopped back and forth, in my rankings. They're back-to-back, and they're playing against each other. You'll see that again here in Tier 3. I didn't do it intentionally. But you've got Travis Kelce, Brenton Strange, Zach Ertz, and then TJ Hawkinson. So Travis Kelce and Brenton Strange, obviously, their teams play each other this week. And really and truthfully, I have a few ways that we approach this. First off, we're going to look at the defenses, right? So Jacksonville is the 18th best defense, Kansas City, 23rd best defense. And really and truthfully, I think what happens is Worthy coming back for Kelce, right? So Worthy being back, he looked great last week. I cautioned people to maybe not play Worthy last week because if he lands on that shoulder wrong, we don't know what it's going to look like. I will take it on the chin there. I was wrong about that. Worthy looked great last week. And truly, what I think is going to happen is I think that's going to take some pressure off of Travis Kelsey, right? So he had 5 catches, 5 targets, 48 yards. As far as the whole year goes, he's fifth in routes run and 10th in targets. So people are like, why do you continue to have Kelsey so high up? Why is he still there? He's still being used heavily. Even if it's as a decoy with the fifth most routes run, defenses are having to pay attention to him. And so I think, especially against the Jags defense that isn't necessarily the best, it's kind of middle of the pack. I truly think that they will be able to kind of exploit that, especially with Worthy being back, Hollywood being a deep threat, still catching his touchdowns. And then we'll move down to Strange. And the reason why I have him below Travis Kelsey, he had 6 catches, 7 targets, 45 yards last week. He's fifth in receptions and seventh in targets. So his usage in terms of, overall and his importance in the offense has been great, right? Travis Hunter's been kind of non-existent at this point, even though he makes these fantastic catches at times. Parker Washington's actually had more targets, I'm pretty sure. I know he has at least the last 2 weeks. And so they're needing to use Brenton Strange to move the ball down the field. It's very similar to last year whenever Trevor Lawrence continued to pepper Evan Ingram with targets. They've continued to use Brenton Strange in the same role there. And so for me, Strange is just kind of a week in, week out play. He's a floor play. He's never really going to kill you, but he's kind of got some limited upside. Is it doesn't really look like he's scoring a lot of touchdowns. They're not really looking his way. And Travis Etienne's killing it. So, maybe Travis Etienne's vulturing some of those touchdowns. He's making explosive plays that are taking away some of the ability, maybe, of Britton Strange to get in the end zone. But that's the reason I have those two ranked the way I do. And then next off, like I'll pop my graphic back up here. You'll see Zach Ertz and then TJ Hawkinson. Now, with Zach Ertz, they do play the Chargers this week. It's the sixth best defense according to PFF. He didn't have a good game last week. 2 catches, 4 targets, and 21 yards, right? However, the big news is JD5, Jaden Daniels, is back at practice this week. And so we saw last week, obviously, he struggled with Mariota in the first week. Mariota kind of kept him afloat, but Jaden Daniels has continued to have a rapport with Zach Ertz, and it really shows. And so with him being back this week, I continue to look at Zach Ertz as a higher tier streaming option, similar to Brenton Strange in terms of a floor play. It's always got a chance to score a touchdown, right? But he's at least going to give you some consistent numbers in that Washington offense. Then you got TJ Hawkinson. They play Cleveland. Not a great matchup, right? Obviously, one of the tougher defenses. They held Green Bay to 13 points. And then again, last week, they looked great. However, that being said, there is a rookie quarterback now in Cleveland, and that is Dylan Gabriel. It was just announced today, Wednesday, if you're watching this later, that Dylan Gabriel is going to be the starting quarterback this week. They're benching Joe Flacco. So good defense mixed with rookie quarterback doesn't really yield a whole lot of offensive production from the opposite side usually. So that's why I have TJ Hawkinson here. He's still getting consistent targets. He had 5 targets last week, 4 catches, 39 yards. He has the ability to do something with it. However, I'm just a little more concerned about the matchup. But I think he's still kind of a tier above some of these guys below that I'm getting ready to pop up. So keep in mind, my tier 4 has a long list of names. It's my 13 through 24. And really and truthfully, I view all these guys as kind of streamers. Most of them are probably, going to be on your waivers, but some may be rostered. And these are guys that I view similarly. And I have them ranked in the way I would play them, but they're all kind of interchangeable. And things change as the situation changes. I actually had the Browns tight ends back to back. I still do, but I had them a little bit higher up with the Joe Flacco, start still looming. But once Dylan Gabriel came in, I downgraded them a little bit. And so now we'll take a look at where they finish. So this week, in order, I've got Dallas Goedert, Mason Taylor, Dalton Schultz, Mark Andrews, Harold Fannin, and Njoku, Chig, Darren Waller, the tight end 2 from last week, Welcome back to the Walrus. If you watch the Fantasy Footballers, you'll know that reference. Theo Johnson, Isaiah Likely, Aronde Gadsden, and then Tommy Tremble, the Panthers tight end here at the end. Right. So I've got a few notes that I kind of want to talk about. Obviously, last week, Goddard was the number one tight end. He had two catches, excuse me, wrong player. Four catches, four targets for 37 yards, and then two touchdowns. Now, he has been hyper efficient so far this year in terms of whenever he gets those targets, he's doing something with them. He's scoring, he's doing whatever, right? He's actually the tight end one last week. And then if you go and look, he's tight end 10 on the year, right? So that goes to show you a lot of his games may not be super consistent. However, he's being super efficient in terms of if he's getting target heavily, he's doing something with it, right? So they play Denver this week, 22nd best defense. Um, really and truthfully, this whole Eagles offense is kind of different right now, right? They don't really turn it on until they need to. They're playing good defense, and then they're making a bunch of plays on special teams. This year has been wild for special teams. We've already seen multiple blocked kicks, and the Eagles have been behind that too. So maybe their defense just continues to allow them to sail. I still have Dallas Goedert here as he obviously has the opportunity to score multiple touchdowns a week. Like I said, he's being hyper efficient. So for me, I'll keep him here. But then if we keep going down, you've got Mason Taylor actually here from the New York Jets. The rookie had 5 catches for 7 targets and 65 yards. Now, before this past week, he hadn't looked too great overall, right? But that being said, he was coveted coming out of LSU, right? He's a tight end 30 overall this year. And here's the kicker, and the reason why I have him so high. They play Dallas this week, right? Dallas is a sieve for fantasy points on that side of the ball. And so for me, I'm not saying the Jets are going to go out and put up 40 points like Green Bay did, but I think there's an opportunity for them to at least score multiple points or multiple touchdowns against the Dallas defense. And that's why I have Mason Taylor here. He's had the targets and the involvement here recently. And that in combination with the defense, like I talked about at the beginning of the video, those are something that I want to target. I've got Dalton Schultz here. He's just a floor play. The Texans offense looked good last week, but he's still being involved. I'll skip over him because there's not too much to talk about the Texans offense. And then you got Mark Andrews here at 16. Now, Mark Andrews, they play the Texans, right? Remember that I was telling you earlier, those back-to-back guys that I somehow managed to do throughout the rankings and not intentionally do it. They play each other this week. And so, yes, I have Dalton Schultz a little bit above Mark Andrews, and that's because the other name on the list at 22, and that is Isaiah Likely. Now, Isaiah Likely came back last week, wasn't involved really at all. They seemed to still be ramping him up. And with that, Andrews had 8 targets, 7 catches for 30 yards, still finished as the tight end 20 with those numbers. So, really and truthfully, I'm not super enthused about these guys. Plus, let's address another elephant in the room in Lamar and his hamstring injury. As of right now, he is trending to be out for week 5, guys. And so if that's the case, Cooper Rush will come in. Um, Cooper Rush is not an incompetent backup. We saw him in Dallas whenever Dak got hurt. So I don't think it's going to overall kill the whole Ravens offense, but I do think it's going to be a little difficult for them. And so you'll see I have Mark Andrews here. I put Likely on here because if they start to ramp him up, sure, maybe it works out. But then you've got Harold Fannin and Njoku. Like I said, I moved those guys down off of the news that Dylan Gabriel was going to be starting. Fannin is still out targeting Njoku, guys, and that's the reason why I have Fannin higher. He had 6 targets last week to Njoku's 3. And so I'm just going to wait it out, especially with them playing Minnesota this week, who has looked like another great defense. PFF has them as the 9th-ranked defense on the season. But as of right now, I'm just waiting that out. Chikakonkwo being used in the Titans or in the Titans offense. However, that offense doesn't look great right now. So he's still here. And you're like, well, then if you don't like these guys above him, why do you have Waller at 20? right? Here's the issue for me. I was never in on Waller. I didn't even know if he would ever actually play this year, right? He looked great at the Giants, originally, and the Raiders originally went to the Giants, didn't do too much really, and then signed with the Dolphins this year, coming back. They've been talking about ramping him up, and it seemed to have showed up, against the Jets the other night. He had 3 catches for 4 targets and 27 yards. Big thing was, though, he had 2 touchdowns. And like I said earlier, that was good enough to have him at tight end 2 for the week. So my issue is, okay, one, they play Carolina. That's a good defense. You want to target that defense. That's great. Okay. So that's no knock against him. However, Tyreek is out. Obviously, he had the horrific knee injury. And with that being said, who's going to step up? Could Waller step into that role like they saw Jonnu last year? Absolutely, he could. I'm just not 100% convinced. So I want to see how that goes. It could lead to an increase in HN targets, which early in the season he's been on fire as far as those go, but it could lead to an increase in workload too. And so then you've got Jalen Waddle, obviously, who's probably going to get the majority of the targets. Tyreek would go. You've got Malik Washington there, Nick Westbrook Akine. So we'll see how the offense shakes out if Waller can step into that role. I just am personally a little bit more down on him than maybe some others. And so then you skip down. We've got Theo Johnson there for the Giants. It is what it is. It could be him. It could be Bellinger. But Jackson Dart made that offense go last week, and they upset the Chargers. So I have him there ahead of Likely. Then we've got Gadsden and Tommy Tremble. So I'm going to pop my face back up on the screen here because if you were paying attention last week, I had a bunch of questions, both here on Reddit, that they were like, "What do I do with Gadsden? Do I just put him in my lineup? Do I start him? How do I navigate this?" And I told everybody, I was like, "It looks great. Like his first weekend, he was heavily involved, really, after the Will Dissly injury. But then I told everybody, I was like, look, it's 1 week. He's a rookie. Let's fill it out first. Let's keep him on your bench." And I think most people would have probably heeded that advice, and I hope you did. He had he had nothing, guys. He had 2 catches, 3 targets, and 16 yards. Now, they did play the Giants. The Giants front 7 are amazing at this point. And so maybe it was that. Maybe the offense really just couldn't get going. The Chargers had some more offensive line injuries, and so Justin Herbert was pressured a lot on a lot of his dropbacks. So all those things kind of mixed together. But that being said, I'm still waiting on Gadsden. I just want his name on here as long as Will Dissly is out, you should be paying attention to him, but not playing him right away. Right. And then the last name on the list, Tommy Tremble. Now, the Panthers tight ends, right? This is where I find interesting. I saw this stat and I was like, wow, that is something I need to pay attention to. So if you remember, I think it was not last week, I think it was the week before, Jatavian Sanders. I was really high on him. And I was like, look, he had the involvement. He's been used as the tight end in the Panthers offense. We know Tet's the one. There's not really anybody else. And so maybe he can fill that role, right? Now, I look back at the score this week, the box score and everything. The Panthers tight ends, okay, they had 8 targets and a touchdown for Trimble. And then their other tight end had 4 targets and another touchdown. So that means in total, they had 12 targets and 2 touchdowns in their tight end position. Obviously, Bryce is seeing something with that tight end position this year. And so for me, I truly think if you can get the Panthers tight end correct, you've got a good shot at a decent fantasy day and at least a touchdown shot every week. So they play Miami, 31st ranked defense, right? You want to target those guys. They've been terrible all season. So for me, keep an eye out for the Panthers. If I'm picking one, it's Tommy Tremble. That's why I have him here at 24. But it's not somebody that, you're dying to go out there and get. You're definitely not prioritizing him on waivers. But if you need to start, just think about it, especially this week. So with all that under the way, I've got my top 24 tight ends in this video. Let me know if you agree with anything, if you would change anything down in the comments below. Feel free to give me a like as it really helps our video grow and the channel as well. like I said, my name is Tyler. I'm part of the FF Mediators. We do live streams every Wednesday here on the Face Off Sports Network. And we have a litany of other content like defense, kickers ratings, running back rankings, wide receivers. We have it all for you here. So feel free to click on the channel, go check out the rest of our videos and content. And hopefully, I'll see you guys next week.